Hello, hello.
Hello, what's going on?
I was going to say, I was worried for a second you couldn't hear me.
I can hear you. It's a slightly different sound. It's as if it's not coming from your headset.
That's entirely possible. Hang on a second. Hang on. There we go. Has that changed?
Say something again.
Hello, hello. It should all now be
I
coming
I
from
think
my
it's fine. I think we can all hear you just fine. And at the end of the day, folks are here not for the entertainment. They're here for
What?
w-
They're not
wisdom,
here
aren't
to be
they?
entertained by you and I now. I thought we were like, oh no.
Even worse, that's like a robot voice right now.
But can you hear me now?
Nope, full robot voice.
I have just.
Okay, so while Gigi is sorting things out, so folks, welcome to the weekly Day One Career Show, where I promise we absolutely will be answering all your questions about behavioral interviews with Amazon. And let me just start us off by telling you who we are, so you you might actually know a little bit about Gigi and myself because you're here on our YouTube channel, you're watching this live. But in case anyone has any questions, so you guys don't know, so both Gigi and I, we used to work at Amazon. We were senior leaders. We were both marketers. And on top of everything, as it often happens at Amazon, you interview a lot of people. So we were interviewers and we were also hiring managers. And Gigi was also a bar raiser. And so both of us that's came to essentially running an interview prep business with our own journeys. So I'll tell you what my journey was, and then we'll see if Gigi will tell you hers. The sound that's coming through from your headset is still that robot voice. You might want to maybe try and rejoin or reboot or something like that.
Hey,
See if that helps.
Alexa.
But for now, I'll just I'll keep on chatting and while Gigi's sorting out her audio. So I was well the way that I came to this interview prep thing is that I recognized that there was a whole bunch of folks who I was interviewing who had absolutely amazing resumes, fit to the job description, but the interview skills of some candidates, wasn't up to scratch. And so what I started doing is rather than rejecting them outright from phone screen one, I started offering them a little bit of coaching at the end of phone screen one, and then passing them on to the next customer for phone screen two, and then seeing what happens. And lo and behold, folks who got some coaching from me on their interview skills ended up doing a little bit better, anecdotally. But again, surprise, surprise, if someone really wants to learn a new skill and you give them some coaching and they take it on and implement it, they get better at stuff. That I think that's pretty simple. So that was my journey. And then when I was in my last 2 months at Amazon, I started coaching. Then I started developing courses, and essentially I started running Day One Careers as a business on top of my day job at Apple. And then at some point in time, there was a client that I worked with, and she said to me, "Oh, do you know this Amazon interview whiz?" And I said, "Yeah, I might have seen her on YouTube. Hello, Amazon interview whiz. How are you?"
Hello, is that better?
Yes, yes. Now we've got you.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's absolutely fine. I was just telling them that there was this amazing client that we both, I remember, worked with, and she said, "Oh, you guys need to meet." And so we met, and we decided to merge our businesses. And so yeah, so from Feb 2022, we operate under Day One Careers. Do you want to share your story and how you ended up with this amazing business of ours?
Yes, I will. In the meantime, folks, if you do have questions, feel free to start writing them down in the comments section. I'll get to the house rules in a few minutes, but whilst I'm yabbering, you may as well drop your questions in. So I don't know if Yevgeny mentioned this because I was away, but I'm an ex-bar raiser, worked at Amazon, did a ton of interviewing. My story of how I got to this life that we now have is whilst I was interviewing, as all the candidates I was interviewing, I started to spot people just doing some weird things, but lots of people doing the same weird thing, which in itself is weird. So after a while, I started to ask candidates why was it they were doing this weird thing, although I didn't tell them I thought it was weird. I just asked them where they got the idea from. And they started to point me in the direction of YouTube, and specifically a couple of channels on YouTube. So being the good Amazonian, I dove deep and discovered these YouTube channels weren't necessarily pointing people in the right direction. They were either done by people who had never worked at Amazon before, or they were done by people who had quite niche roles in Amazon and had a particularly somewhat kind of focused point of view that didn't necessarily apply to every single role in Amazon. So I set up a YouTube channel whilst I was still working at Amazon, and Amazon promoted me and were very happy with that. The end of my journey at Amazon, I decided I would just see if I could keep this whole Amazon interview whiz thing going and see if I could make a little bit of money to bridge the gap in my salary. And then the Yevgeny bit kind of flows into it. So that's essentially how we came together. In terms of day one careers, you've obviously seen the YouTube channel. You're here and we're very grateful to see you. We also have an extensive blog. If you are more of a reading type person than a visual person, you can head to our blog on our website. At the end of today's session, we are going to give you some freebies associated with some of the paid work that we do. It will be completely free, I promise you, but just make sure you hang around for that amazing freebie. In terms of today's session, then, the way this works is you lovely people out there on the internet are going to post your questions on this little panel here on the right-hand side. Just a little bit of parameters in terms of the questions that you post. Please don't just post a generic question, I've got an interview tomorrow, any suggestions? Because for sure there is an entire YouTube channel and many, many hours of suggestions. So please avoid anything as generic as that. On the other side of the spectrum, please don't ask us very specific questions about specific job family functional questions. There are thousands, if not tens of thousands, of different job families in Amazon, and neither us nor anyone else, quite frankly, can be subject matter expert enough to be able to tell anybody who's interviewing for any functional role exactly what questions they're going to get on that functional role. So please avoid those types of questions because we are literally incapable, as anyone would be incapable of answering them. Anything in between is fair play. Usually we can answer pretty much 99% of questions. If we can't answer the question for you, we will let you know so that you don't feel that we are ignoring you. So with that said, then I guess we can probably kick off. Have I missed anything, Evgeny?
No, I think it's great. Should I pick the first one and then
Yeah,
you
you go with the first one.
Cool. So thank you for all the thank you all for everything. My loop is coming up in a few weeks. It's for a sales role, and I was told the hiring manager will be in the loop. I met the hiring manager on the phone screen already. Good sign. The hiring manager is involved in the loop. Normal sign. That's how it's supposed to be. I think there. I swear to God, Gigi. Last year, I met someone who told us that the hiring manager was not in the loop, and they had to interview with them separately. Um, have you
So,
ever
yeah,
seen of these edge cases?
yes. So that does happen occasionally when people are applying for roles that are quite, well, quite generic. So there are teams where, if you imagine like Amazon Ads account manager roles or brand manager roles, the roles themselves are really very, very standard, and there's almost no deviation in terms of the responsibility and the scope of the role, which means that pretty much anybody who is a manager of brand managers or ad sales managers is perfectly as capable as another manager of interviewing and making a hire decision. Obviously, the only gap is kind of personality type stuff, but Amazon doesn't care about that in the first place. So yes, in those cases, that would not be uncommon. There are obviously edge cases where somebody's critically ill or they've had to go on some kind of business trip last minute and things like that, where they might make a decision to delegate the hire decision to another person. Those are pretty rare because they're quite high risk. But that's the other edge case that I would know about.
Yes, actually, and as you were speaking, I remembered what role she was interviewing for. It was a pooled role
Right,
for an L5 program manager.
right.
That was it.
Yeah. So bog standard role, same responsibilities between every single role, and therefore it doesn't really matter who's hiring you, because you might get allocated to any other team.
Yes, but otherwise, Devin, absolutely normal.
Yeah, so Devon, just the reason why it's normal and why Amazon generally chooses to do this is it's just a second point of validation. So if you can impress the hiring manager twice with different sets of questions, because they will come to you with different sets of questions and probably different leadership principles, if you can impress them twice, then that's an even stronger indicator of a good hire decision. Okay, so Raj, what are the most important LPs in general for a software development manager? Okay, so it genuinely differs across the organization, because the responsibilities of an SDM who's working on an Alexa product could be really very, very different from an SDM who's working on some kind of internal tool. So I would not like to make broad sweeping statements about the most important LPs. What I will say is just look at the job description, try and look at the job description and break it down word for word for word, and try and see the language in the job description that you think is indicative of a certain leadership principle. The other thing to do, which quite frankly everybody should do, is ask your recruiter if they're willing to share with you the key LPs. If you want some help in terms of how to break that job description down, there are 2 videos on the YouTube channel, which are, I think they're in a single playlist, which is leadership principle or job description deconstruction, I think it's called. So go check that out. That's me deconstructing job descriptions live on one of these sessions a couple of years ago. How long ago it was doesn't matter. But if you go there and have a look, that should be helpful. If you would like to be super, super accurate with it, you can always take out a paid service, which I offer, where I will deconstruct the job description for you. Oh, there's some echo. Can you hear that?
Is there?
Yeah, but you can't hear it. Maybe it's just me. Okay, that's it then, Raj. That's my answer to that question. Do you want to pick the next one, Yevgeny?
Yes, I'm going to pick the next one. So, right, I'm hoping to hear good news about my loop for L6 role in sales. Is it advisable to do an LP story around a situation that is not related to the role, but something I'm really proud of and was intense? So, generally speaking, try to pick stories where the behaviors that link to that particular leadership principle is something that's really shining, right? And it's a good indicator that you feel like you're proud of that particular situation, maybe your achievements or accomplishments, or maybe how you deliver those accomplishments insofar as what what the LP is looking for. The situation does not necessarily need to be related to the role. That being said, obviously, Amazon will not say no if you have situations that have functional relevance to the role and they're demonstrating the behavioral, the behaviors that link to the LP. But if you have to pick, for example, and you feel like you have a very strong story where the behaviors really map to the LP, but it may not necessarily be something that is functionally relevant to the role, pick it. I would say yes, go for it and pick it as well. Anything you'd add?
Nope, completely agree. Okay, so next question. Okay, I'll just quickly cover this off because we already said it in housekeeping. Hey, is it Vardy? I'd go for that. Apologies if I've mispronounced that. I mentioned this in housekeeping, but maybe you weren't here then. We can't tell you specifically what questions you're going to be asked for on the functional side of things. There are many thousands, if not tens of thousands, of job families. No one individual is going to be able to be knowledgeable enough about every single one of those job families to be able to tell you what functional questions to expect. So apologies, we cannot answer this question, but I didn't want to ignore you. So I'm just going to move on to the next one. Okay. Okay. If final interview is rescheduled, does that mean they've selected a candidate? Hey, Luke. No. If your interview's been rescheduled, it means because they can't do the original time. If they've selected a candidate, what they'll do is cancel your interview because it's pointless interviewing you if they've already had an offer accepted. Now, sometimes what happens is they make an offer to another candidate, but your loop is so close to the time where they've made that offer, they might decide to carry on and do your interview anyway, just on the off case that that other candidate either declines the offer, or perhaps there's an opportunity to find you another role. That's not the use case that you're sharing here. The use case you're sharing here is your interview has been rescheduled. So no, I would not say that that is indicative of them having found a candidate for the role. Do you want to pick the next one?
Yep. Okay, hi guys, thank you for doing this. What in certain questions I do not have data metrics to show? How can I answer the impact in results? So in order to demonstrate impact, if you don't have data and metrics, you can use things like, and I'm going to give you my stash, and then Gigi will give you her stash of tricks. Number one, if you can make a very reasonable estimate. Number two, you can provide a senior member of your organization's approval. So, for example, if you achieved an important milestone and someone very senior approved it and accepted it, especially in consulting situations where you've submitted something like an analysis of sorts or a recommendation and got approved, accepted, but you may not know what's happened to it, then that's absolutely, I mean, nothing beats actually having some metrics and results, but fundamentally, if you don't have them, you don't have them. And so approval from someone senior is also good. Then there are some stories where metrics and results may not be actually the best way to demonstrate results. For example, plenty of situations under earned trust, you probably will be talking about convincing someone to support you, whereas the starting point is them not supporting you. And you might have theoretically some results to share, but it's only if you're sharing them almost like as claiming the piece of a bigger pie. Like, for example, if you had a little misunderstanding or you had criticism from, let's say, a cross-functional team member, they came to you, they criticized you, but the project stalled. The project was big, but the project stalled because of that. And resolving that and convincing them to support you was a milestone without which the project would not be able to go ahead. So, your immediate result does not have any metrics because you submitted someone and someone started supporting you, but then you can also say, and as a result of that, so almost like a cherry in the cake, the project got unstuck and you delivered it into great results. So that's the other trick. But Gigi, what's your bag of tricks there?
Just one extra one, which is borrowed metrics. So if the work that you've done, Ravi, doesn't have direct metrics associated with it, but the work that you've done has enabled a downstream team to achieve something that has direct metrics associated with it, those would be metrics that I would use. So you would say, my contribution enabled X team to achieve Y, Z metric. That would be my additional one. Okay, shall I pick another one? Oh, another one from Ravi. Okay, what if I'm not able to answer the follow-up detailed question because it was not my area of expertise or someone else from my team was owning the work? Ravi, you say, I'm sorry, I do not have the answer to that question because it was not my area of expertise, or I do not have the answer to that question because someone else in my team was owning that work. That's all you can do. Right? You can't make stuff up. Well, you can, but you have to be super, super confident in making stuff up and being able to cope with drill downs and challenges on those data points. So yeah, just tell the truth. Right? Just tell the truth. Do you want to pick the next one?
Yes. Okay. In my phone interview, I got feedback to improve my structure, the STAR. I tend to over-explain the situation. How much detail is enough?
That's
Honestly,
hard. It's a hard answer. You can't really. There's no way of articulating that, is
how
there?
long is a piece of
Piece of string. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm kind of surprised that they gave you that feedback about over-explaining in the situation, because usually they tend to prefer more details than less. But then again, without actually having been a fly on the wall during that interview, is completely impossible. Generally speaking, if you look at the Amazon guidelines for the total story, they recommend to keep it under 4 minutes. Our guidelines are we're guiding people to go further than 4 minutes, depending on the level, but specifically on your question on how long a situation is good for, it's hard to know. Did you have any other pieces of wisdom in this situation?
Well, I suppose when you're setting up the situation, you only need to include enough information so that when you talk about your task and your actions, they make sense. So how much detail you need to do that is going to differ depending on the story. If it's a particularly complicated situation, then it's going to take you longer to explain it than if it's a simple situation. But just, I guess you just have to challenge yourself. If I didn't share this piece of information in the situation, would the rest of the story make sense? If the answer is yes, this actually, I could delete this entire line and the rest still makes sense, then you know that's unnecessary data.
Yeah.
So edit backwards, I suppose. Okay, I'm not sure I understand this one, so I'm going to put it out there and maybe either you, Yevgeny, or David can give me some more insight. So for TPM, I'm mapping out my achievements and star stories based on key LPs, but when I'm asked a question, it's often difficult. Oh, there's a second part. Right, okay, right, I see. Right, that's why it didn't make sense. To know what story to tell based on the question. What is the most effective way to identify the LP based on the question? Okay, so we suggest you don't do that, actually, David. We suggest you just answer the question. So I like to think of Amazon interview preparation in kind of two parts. So the first part is understand the leadership principles, understand them really, really well, and develop multiple stories that address that leadership principle. If you have understood the leadership principles well enough, your multiple stories should be able to cover you for any question asked about that leadership principle, because the questions are based on the leadership principle and the definition of the leadership principle. If your stories are based on the definition of the leadership principle, then any question you're asked, you should be able to answer. So you've got to start off with focusing on the leadership principles, really, really understanding the leadership principles and building multiple stories for that leadership principle. Then you have a catalog of examples in your head ready to go. Then when the question comes along, you answer the question. You ask yourself, what is the best story that I have that matches this question? And if you've done your preparation right, you should automatically be pulling out the story that is connected to the leadership principle, that is connected to the question that they asked you. The risk is if you're trying to predict the leadership principle based on the question and you're just going, oh, okay, I think this is earn trust. I'm just going to pull out my earn trust story. If you've made the wrong prediction, you're going to end up pulling out a story that is nothing to do with the question. Or even if you get the right leadership principle and trust and you pull out your earn trust story, if you aren't pulling out the one that actually answers the question, you're still going to be in a bit of trouble, not trouble, get yourself into a bit of a pickle, because your interviewer will effectively be thinking, okay, that's definitely an earn trust story, but they haven't answered my question. I've got earn trust evidence here, but a little bit of a red flag over not actually listening to my question. So you've got to think about it in two parts. Just start with your leadership principles and build multiple stories for your leadership principles. Then practice getting different interview questions and asking yourself, if I got this interview question, which of my stories would I use? And then what would be the key points that I would focus on from my story that would actually answer this question? So don't think about questions in the first part of your preparation. It's all about the leadership principle. Questions then become the final part of your preparation and you answer the question. Don't think about what the leadership principle is, just answer the question. Anything to add, Yevgeny?
Nope. Textbook. Right.
Liz, the crossword nerd. Fantastic.
Love it.
And Liz is like looking upwards, like, oh, you're all idiots. I love it. Brilliant
Yeah.
profile picture, Liz. Love it.
Yeah, right. I knew we. Right. First phone screen tomorrow. Wasn't actually scheduled for a recruiter call. Have lots of questions. It's for a general manager assistant in an FC. Not sure what level. Worried about scope and complexity of my stories. Any ideas to make sure I cover my bases? Thanks so much for all your help. So, there's actually no way to know how much scope / complexity you know for each level, believe it or not, because that bar is very dynamic and it really indeed it depends on what level you're interviewing for, but it also depends on who else is doing these jobs at the same level. at Amazon, because that's what they're going to be benchmarking whatever you're sharing with them with. So all you can do is push yourself to share the best, your greatest hits from your career, that not from someone else's career, not from what you think they would like to hear, but from your career, right? Because categorically we advise everyone against inventing stories, and if we assume that we're all operating within the constraints of our career, then just bring your best. Bring the stories where you've solved the most complex problems, the biggest problems, where you've delivered the biggest results to your team and your organization, and operated with the largest scope. And then you just have to trust that it's going to be enough for them. And if it isn't, then it's not your fault. It's just maybe it's not the right job. But that's all I can tell you. Short of asking you to book a coaching session with one of us, but seeing as your phone screen is tomorrow, that's basically the best guidance I can give you. Gigi, do you have any other sort of last minute tips for Liz, the crossword nerd?
No, I think Liz has got the same problem as everyone else has got, which is I don't really know what the scope and complexity requirement is. Everyone has that problem. So you just have to put as much complexity and scope in the story and hope for the best. Okay. All right. So moving on then. Okay. I have a program manager L4 loop in a couple of weeks. Okay. The role is in global freight management. I was worried if I have to familiarize myself with concepts in global supply chain or just be focused on LPs. Okay. So we can't tell you this definitively because we aren't the ones interviewing you, and the hiring manager has a lot of wiggle room for how they do or do not introduce functional questions. We'll call these functional questions into their interview process. So the best person to ask is the recruiter. However, I will speculate that given this is an L4 role, which is incredibly junior, and actually, I'm not sure I've ever seen an L4 program manager role. Yevgeny, have you?
L4 program manager. Nope,
Yeah,
never seen them.
no, I've not seen one either. I was surprised to see that as an L4. So given it is a really junior role, basic entry level type stuff, I wouldn't expect your hiring manager to expect you to be incredibly familiar with the concepts of global supply chain. So I would say I don't think you should worry about that too much, but definitely check with the recruiter because they are going to be the closest source of truth that you can get. Do you want to pick the next one?
Yes. So there's a question in the loop. Can I repeat an LP story that I used with the hiring manager on the phone screen? Will the interviewers know my answer to those LPs already? So, yes, you can. However, we advise the interviewer that you've already mentioned this particular example to someone else during your phone screen, and then see what they say, because some of them may be okay with it. Some of them would say, I'd actually prefer something else and fresh, and in which case you should be ready with something that is fresh for the same LP. But if your interviewer is fine with it, then go for it. In terms of will the new interviewers know my answer to those LPs already? No, they won't. And I think not until the debrief, right? Or for phone screen, it's just the hiring manager and the bar raiser that have
Yeah, the hiring
access to
manager of
them,
the
aren't
bar
they?
raiser will be able to
Yeah.
access phone
Yes,
screen
or no?
notes.
So no.
So will the new interviewers know my answer to those
No.
LPs?
They won't.
Well, it depends. If one of the new interviewers is the bar raiser, then yes. If one of the new if it's anybody else, then no.
Then no.
Okay. Right. So this is a two-parter. Oh, and then it'll be that time after this one. I'm preparing for the phone interview for Amazon Robotics. Can't find any solid details overall in the internet. Even reached out to Amazonians on LinkedIn, but no luck. Any tips on how I can go about this, although I've whittled down the LPs around the JD? Okay, I'm not really clear on the definition of solid details. So what do you mean by solid details? And then I might be able to give you some advice, but unclear on what exactly you're looking for. So please just type in again at the bottom and just provide a little bit more detail, and maybe we can try and answer that for you. All right, folks, so we're just going to pause ever so momentarily here. We have a very, very simple request for you, and that request is that when you watch any of these videos or watch our live stream, that you give us a thumbs up, that you like the stream, or you put a little comment in there. The reason that is obviously we put a huge amount of effort into doing these sessions every single week, and also all of the content on YouTube and all of our blog and the free stuff that we give you away. And it is a privilege to be able to support you in your ambition. But we would really, really love your help. If you could like our content, put in a comment. What it does is it tells YouTube that the YouTube algorithm that they have, number one, surfaced that content to the right person, and number two, that that right person actually likes the content. What that will do is then it just boosts our content in the algorithm, and it means that other people, and even yourself, next time you come back to YouTube, are more likely to see the high quality, high production value, with the exception of some really old videos, content that we have produced here for you on Day One Careers. So in the next 10 seconds, maybe 14 of them, I'm just going to ask you to do that for this particular stream, get you into a little bit of practice. So I'm going to play a little bit of amusing clip. Whether it's amusing or not, I guess, is subjective. And whilst I do that, I would really appreciate if you could just give this stream a like. I can see how many people have liked the stream here on my other screen, so I will know if you haven't done it. You know, no threats or anything, but if you would really do that for us, that would be amazing. So we're just going to run this quickly. I don't think this one's particularly noisy, but if you have sensitive ears, you might just want to pop headphones back for a second. Live the stream. Live the stream. Live the stream. There we go. Who does not love Disco Gigi, huh?
Disco Gigi is the best.
Disco Gigi.
Next best to the is it a mezzo soprano that you're doing in the other one?
Yes.
Yes. That was beautiful. Absolutely marvelous mezzo soprano. Okay.
Thank you. Right. Do you want to pick the next one?
Yeah. Okay. So any tips on group tasks in virtual interviews? Oh yeah, there's virtual group interviews. I think there will be 6 in the group working together to solve a problem. DevOps apprenticeship, absolutely not. Not a single clue. Sorry, I need to pick another one, don't I?
Yeah. So that this falls into the category of this is a very specific functional question, stuff. And tens of thousands of job families in Amazon. Maybe that's an exaggeration. I'm sorry. We and no one else can be experts at that level of detail.
No. Okay. Do I need to talk about technical details with the bar raiser, considering they are not from my technical field? So when someone asks me this question, I always say, you in encountering a bar raiser and actually preparing to interview with someone who doesn't understand your technical field is a great exercise for you to be able to explain what it is that you do in very simple English. And that is possible. And Gigi and I, we've helped and coached and interviewed folks from all walks of life. And it is possible to explain what you do in simple English. And so your job is to maintain a balance. On the one hand, to avoid throwing away the technical and functional details of your story, because then it becomes very vague and the details are not there and it's impossible to grade you. And the other extreme is overloading someone who has no idea about anything that you do, and then they won't be able to grade you either, because they will be buried underneath those technical details and they're not going to be able to see behaviors. General rule of thumb for me, and it's more of a mental model, is that fundamentally a behavioral interview is a cultural fit interview to Amazon. They are trying to see if you're an Amazonian. Do you behave? Do you operate in these situations like what they believe an Amazonian would? So behaviors, they take precedence over anything else. But obviously, you won't be able, and you should not throw away technical or functional details, because that is your job, and that's absolutely fine. Just find a way to explain what you do in more simple terms, and it's a good test. It's a good exercise for you, and it'll be absolutely fine, and it's doable. You know, if it's doable for fulfillment center pre-construction managers who try to explain to me what they're doing, all the way to someone who worked on website latency, developing AI snippets for a certain big tech company. I'm not going to say which one.
Sounds fascinating. Okay. Okay, there's a two-parter here. I applied for an SDE role using a new email in September and had already interviewed for another SDE role around the same time but got rejected. For this application, I completed the OA, okay, so that's an online assessment and work simulation, right? Part 2, in early Feb, a recruiter informed me that I passed and would get a survey by mid-February. However, I haven't received it and the recruiter isn't responding. What should I do next in this situation? I'm afraid there's not very much you can do. If the recruiter isn't responding, not a lot else you can do, because you don't know what team this is for, so you can't hit up anyone on LinkedIn. So I would just keep badgering the recruiter in the nicest possible way and keep applying for other SCE roles. They're kind of a penny a dozen in the nicest possible way. There's not a lot you can do. It's out of your hands. So keep following up and keep applying to other roles. It's the best advice I can give.
All right, next one. If I don't know the reason behind a metric provided by a client or a customer, is it appropriate to say I didn't have the visibility into it, or would that reflect poorly on me? I think the only way for me to be able to answer this question is to know what exactly is the metric that you're talking about, because I can't really fully understand.
Yes,
What
and why would you
advice.
introduce a metric into your story that you don't understand, because it would need to be fundamental to your story to make it worthwhile mentioning it. So yeah, without knowing the exact situation, which you can't do here on YouTube, I don't think we can answer that. But the broader point, I suppose, is don't bother bringing a metric into a story that isn't core to the story and therefore you don't understand. I think that's the key takeout. Yeah, Yevgeny?
Yes, unless you are inside the Hitchhiker's Guide to Galaxy and your answer is 42 to everything. Moving on.
Okay, oh, the next one's mine, isn't it? Okay.
Mhm.
What differentiates a strong PMM interview at Amazon from a good one? Okay, there's no way of answering that question. It depends on the definition of strong and good. It depends what level you're talking about. It will depend on the team and all of the people that they work with, which is to Yevgeny's point earlier. These things are impossible to quantify outside of the debrief. And even in the debrief, they wouldn't be able to quantify it. It would be at a micro level where they would be discussing it. So I'm afraid there is no answer to that question. In PMM interviews, which LPs are usually tested multiple times across different rounds? There is no answer to that question either. Individual hiring managers get to choose which leadership principles they are really interested in. Even roles that are within the same job family, the nature of the work associated with those roles is going to mean that different leadership principles are more important. If you are a program manager, this is a product marketing manager, right, for PMM. If you're a product marketing manager and you're launching a brand new product, the leadership principles that are going to be the higher priority are going to be very different to if you are a product marketing manager who is working on a deprecating product. No way of answering that question either, and definitely no way of answering it in terms of those that are tested across multiple rounds. Sorry, there is not there just simply is not enough rigidity around the interview process to be able to answer those questions.
True. Okay. If I mention using tools like SEMrush or Tableau, should I expect questions on how I use them? For example, how I created the dashboard? You might, you may not. It really depends on the context of the interview, what leadership principle they're testing. Like, for example, if it's dive deep and the question is, tell me about a time when you needed to root cause a complex problem or something like that, then and your tool of choice in that particular story was Tableau, yes, they might ask you what exactly you did, or they may not. It really depends on kind of what sparks their curiosity and what follow-up questions would they want to ask to ascertain that they can see to tease out those behaviors that they need from your responses. And do you have a different perspective on this?
No, I'm trying to read between the lines of this line of questioning. I think the broad point is, do not claim to have used or have knowledge of tools if you do not have knowledge of them and if you have not used them. Because to Yevgeny's point, there is every possibility that the interviewer might get curious about your knowledge and use of that tool, even if it isn't fundamental to the question that you're being asked. If they ask you a question, I don't know, about earn trust, and you happen to mention SEMrush, they could very well stop and go, oh, you've used SEMrush, let's talk about that, and move away from the leadership principle part of the exploration because you've piqued their curiosity. And then you might be in trouble if you're just mentioning these things but haven't actually used them. So the broader point is, do not claim to have used things or know about things that you have not used and do not know, because you'll always be at risk of someone digging into that particular area. Fair, Yevgeny?
Very, very, very fair.
Okay, so how does an L6 and an L5 story differ? The only way to answer this is in very generic terms, which is they differ in terms of scope and complexity. So an L6 story is going to need to have more scope and more complexity in it. If you then say, Gigi, what do you mean by more scope and more complexity? Be more specific. I cannot be more specific because it's entirely dependent on the nature of your story. And more scope and complexity in one type of story is going to look different to more scope and complexity in another type of story. How much scope and complexity, Gigi? Again, I cannot tell you this because an L6 bar raising story, that bar is always moving. So the level of complexity that you would need to have gotten to 5 years ago is going to look very different to the level of complexity that you're going to need to get to today because the bar is always raising. So unfortunately, I have to give you the most generic of answers with scope and complexity, and I suspect you probably knew that yourself before you asked the question. Would you like to pick the next one, Yevgeny?
Yes. This is the second time I'm being interviewed at Amazon. Can I use the same written assessment response that I used in the previous interview process? Just thinking out loud here. So if you're saying that you're interviewing for, it's the second time that you're interviewing, so it means that during the previous time you've passed your online. Is it written assessment response? Oh yeah, yeah. No one cares. That basically use whatever you want. Previous response, new response, because they're just testing your writing. That's all. As long as you can bang out a reasonably structured, reasonably kind of well argued piece of writing that's not longer than 1.5 pages, you're good to go.
Okay. Let's just pick this one. Okay. Is it absolutely a must to only talk about stories with 5 years, even if the interviewee has 15 to 20 years of experience? Okay, so we will always tell you that recency is preferable. And recency is preferable because what Amazon is trying to do is predict how you might behave in the future based on how you've behaved in the past. If you describe a behavior that happened in the recent past, then the probability of you being able to replicate that behavior in the near future is pretty good because it's recent past and near future. If you have to go back 10 years for a good example of when you earned someone's trust, that's the distant past. What's the probability that given there was a 10-year gap between the last time you think you've got a decent story about earning trust and now, what's the probability if you haven't earned anybody's trust to a high quality in the past 10 years that you'll be able to do that tomorrow? Far less than a story from the recent past. So that isn't to say that you cannot go back in time, but if you are going to go back in time, you really need to have an incredible story that really demonstrates you punching well above your weight relative to 10 years ago for that leadership principle. Otherwise, you risk your interviewer saying, well, how come they couldn't perform at a high level in the 10 years? It's taken them 10 years and they've done nothing that's impressive on earns trust because they haven't been able to bring it to the table. So yes, you can go back, but the whole point of the Amazon interview is to bring data to convince them that you will be able to demonstrate that behavior tomorrow. So using stories from the recent parts makes so much more sense because it's going to be more likely that you could demonstrate that tomorrow if you did it yesterday. If you did it 10, 15 years ago, I'm less convinced that you haven't done it for the past 10, 15 years that you're going to be able to do it tomorrow. Okay, so 5 years, yes, definitely. 7 years, fine. But once you're kind of getting up to the 10, 15, 20 years, particularly because 15, 20 years ago, the type of work that you will be doing with probably much lower scope and complexity than the role that you're applying for now. So not only is it this person doesn't look like they're very likely to demonstrate this leadership principle behavior tomorrow, seeing as the last time they did it worth talking about was 10 years ago, but also they're in a much more junior role, and this doesn't even demonstrate the scope and complexity associated with the role that you're interviewing for today. So that is the logic behind sticking with more recent examples.
Agreed. Next one. I've already asked all the questions I can think of on phone screen and to recruiter. What should I ask / come up with on the loop? Do I ask each loop interviewer a question at the end? Well, I guess I'll bat this back to you. Do you want to ask them a question at the end? It's a big thing. Getting a new job. Going to be there between 9. I want to say 5, but knowing this is Amazon, 5 not going to happen. So it's going to be, it's going to be one of them live commitments. So might want to ask some questions about what the culture is like. Seriously, just make them yours. Find something you're interested in. It doesn't count towards your interview assessment. The time is really for you. In some interviews, you might have the time. In some interviews, may not have the time. Don't try to manipulate your interviewer with your questions. But then ask whatever you want. If you want, ask them about work-life balance if that's important to you. So, seriously, I mean, they're not going to mind. Ask them about the team strategy, difficulties. I don't know, whatever it is that you're interested in. So if it's something confidential, they may not answer it, but but do ask your questions. If you don't ask questions, then that becomes a question mark. But otherwise, don't feel like you have to ask something to manipulate an interviewer. Would you ask anything? Would you add anything else, Gigi?
I do think if anyone asks you, do you have any questions, that the right thing to do is to say yes. If you don't have any questions, there's a big question mark over, well, how could you possibly not have any questions considering the level of commitment that's going into this and the black hole of knowledge that you have about the role. So what I would say is we have a really good video on the YouTube channel, which gives a list of possible questions that you could ask, and it covers hiring manager, bar raiser, and a peer. So just go check that out. And even if you don't care about the answers to the questions it suggests, just ask them anyway, because although the questions that you ask don't go towards your assessment, not asking any questions is going to be a red flag. So just ask something that you're not particularly interested in if genuinely you aren't interested in anything, just so that you're showing that you're interested, even if you're not. You know what I mean? All right. What is the etiquette regarding notes in a virtual interview? And also pausing for a few seconds to find the right example and answer before starting. Okay, so we would advocate, and I think most recruiters would say the same, that notes are fine. An Amazon interview, or any interview actually, shouldn't be a memory test. And there's a lot of information that you're going to be asked to share with your interviewer and interviewers over the course of the whole thing. So having some light notes is perfectly acceptable. Where you choose to kind of physically put those notes is up to you. Some people do sticky notes around the frame of their computer. Other people have notebooks. Other people have stuff stuck on the wall around them. Other people have a second screen, although I'm less of a fan of second screens. But however you choose to manifest your notes, that's fine. But you do need to make sure that they are brief notes so that you are not tempted to read off them like a script, because most interviewers will very, very quickly identify that you are reading off a script, and that is definitely a no-no. But light notes, bullet points, data points written down so that you don't forget them or misrepresent them inaccurately is all absolutely fine. I would always suggest that before you start your interview with any of your interviewers, you let them know that you do have some notes that you might be referring to, but you promise that you will not be reading off it like a script. I would say that as an opener for every single interviewer. In terms of pausing for a few seconds to get the right example before starting, yes, this is an absolute must. I mean, it's an absolute must because if you're not pausing to think about the question that you're being asked, then you're not going to be answering the question. You can't answer a question and not having actually spent any time thinking about the question. So pausing is an absolute must. How long is it acceptable to pause for? I would say 30 seconds, not a problem whatsoever. That would be kind of the expected. 45 is probably around the sweet spot. Once you're getting past 60 seconds, then it is getting possibly a little bit long, but 60 seconds is a lot of time to sit quietly and think. Amazonians are very comfortable with silence. They, as you probably know, when they go into a meeting, there is a written document and everyone sits in the meeting for 30 minutes in complete silence, scribbling on these written documents. So Amazonians become very familiar and very comfortable with silence. I know that's quite unnatural to the vast majority of the population, where silence is generally not a good thing, but Amazon recognizes that silence is an opportunity for thought. So don't be afraid of the silence. So yes, I would always say pause and think. 30 seconds, no question. 45, probably the sweet spot. Anything over 60, and you may be getting a little bit long. Would you add anything, Yevgeny?
No, no, totally with you. Okay, so this one is from Philip. Excuse me, you skipped a question. I also have an interview for a finance intern role. What LPs should I focus on? Sorry, Philip. It's hard to know what LPs you should be focusing on because it's down to the hiring manager. Each and every hiring manager or author of the job description to think about what leadership principles are important for this particular role. So my recommendation is locate two of the videos that we have in our channel where Gigi explains how to analyze the job description for, in this case, for your internship, and try and identify the keywords that map to the leadership principles that would be important for this role. So that would be my best recommendation. If in doubt, if you're struggling, then Gigi provides this service for a very reasonable fee, which you can book from our website. Anything you'd add, Gigi?
No. Right, now we have some clarification on this one. Okay, the metric is the goal of the project was to increase share of voice from X% to Y%, and I don't know why the client shows why. Yeah, that's fine. It's fine.
Client's
Understand.
ambition.
Yeah, it's not a problem. Okay, I'll just pick the next one. Right, so this is another clarification, solid details. So the examples of the solid details that you're looking for is whether it's a junior or mid-level role, the number of technical questions, the complexity of it. Okay, so you mean the complexity of the role, focused leadership principles versus the details available for more senior roles. Okay, I don't quite understand some of that, but I think the broad point is the only people that are going to be able to give you that detail is the recruiter. So They can tell you whether it's a junior or mid-level role. They might be able to tell you the number of technical questions, although they may not even have that information. That's actually probably a function of the individual interviewer and how many questions they want to ask you and how many they'll get through. Complexity of it, assuming complexity of the role. Again, if that's not clear in the job description, the recruiter would be the person to talk to, or when you get to the interview, to dive into details of that with the hiring manager once you get to your questions part of the interview. Focused LPs versus the details available for the more senior roles. I don't really understand that, but if I break those two things in two, focused LPs, recruiter again, or deep dive the job description for yourself. Details available for the more senior roles, I don't understand that at all. So if you're asking if you're interested in more senior roles than the role that you've applied for, I'm not sure I would be raising that with the recruiter personally. But yeah, so hopefully I've covered that off as best I can. Have you understood that any differently to me, Evgeny?
No, exactly. That was exactly like you understood it. Okay. So
Yeah.
let's keep it going. Right. Any tips for virtual interviews in general? I was virtual group interviews. So still, it's more important to show good teamwork and the collaboration rather than being right. I don't know for sure, but I'm gonna say yeah, probably. But yeah, it's hard to know. Let me pick a different one. Do you know?
Well, just I think it's more of a balance of the two. You
Oh,
you know, you don't want to be right and be an a-hole about it. Yes, it's great to show great team collaboration, but if you're constantly wrong in the decisions that you make, that's not ideal. So essentially, I'm afraid you've got to try and find the right balance.
Yes. I had my second interview last week for the supply chain manager role, and I got an email that I got to the loop. Well done. However, she said I should add complexity to my stories. Can that be a hindrance ahead? Yes, in theory. So this is where they're. I mean, in theory, they should evaluate you again against the same bar during the phone screen and during the loop. What might have happened here is that they didn't, and they thought, okay, let's see what you got. You might be a promising candidate. Let us give you a little bit of coaching. So they give you a little bit of coaching. Now, what you do with this advice, it depends, because categorically we at Day One Careers, we advise against inventing details. So when it comes to adding complexity, what they're really asking for is pick stories where you solved problems that were more complex and explain where that complexity came from and explain the process of problem solving that demonstrates you wrestling with that complexity. So if you take heed of this recommendation and adjust how you communicate, if you pick stories that have where you're solving more complex problems and you share the journey that you took to demonstrate that it wasn't a walk in the park where it was just bish bash bosh and that's it, result, then that should help. What would your recommendation be, Gigi?
You got to add complexity to your stories. There's not much else I can say beyond that. But if you've definitely got that feedback, then I would say that this is an issue. Someone has fed that back to the recruiter who spoke to you to say, I like her. What they've probably done is they've done a Yevgeny, which is they think you've probably got what it takes, but you didn't clearly demonstrate that through the words that you used. So they're going to give you the benefit of the doubt, pass you through, and give you some advice, which is add more complexity. So they think you've got it, but you just haven't demonstrated it, and they've given you the benefit of the doubt. So do not waste that benefit of the doubt. Because you've got a nice person like Yevgeny who gave you the benefit of the doubt, and you didn't have a horrible person like me who wouldn't have given you the benefit of the doubt. Did we call that now in future doing a Yevgeny? Whenever you give anyone the benefit of the doubt, it's doing a Yevgeny.
I'll never say no to you. Whatever you say. We'll talk about the freebies. Do you want me to talk about the freebies?
Yeah, you talk about the freebies. I'm sorry, folks, we are out of time. So if you haven't had a chance to get your question answered, feel free to go to the YouTube channel and drop your question in there. We usually get back to you within 24 hours. So apologies, we haven't had a time to get through all of them.
That's cool. And then, so folks, freebies, right? So these are some really, really, really good freebies. So here's the URL. Here's the URL: www.dayone.careers/free -stuff, where you're gonna get 3 amazing freebies. Number 1, you're going to get a free course on how to prepare to answer Amazon interview questions on customer obsession. Customer obsession is arguably the most frequently used LP in interviews, according to this person's experience. But come on, customer obsession is the bedrock of Amazon, and we're giving you this course completely for free. So at the end of this course, you will know exactly what they're looking for in terms of behaviors. You will hear Gigi interviewing herself to give you a standard of what a great response is, and also what how to handle follow-up questions. So, and it gives you a flavor of our big fundamental paid preparation suite, which we call Amazon Interview Success System. So what we're giving you for free on customer obsession, we have for the rest of the 15 leadership principles in there, along with AI tools and a whole bunch of other interesting stuff in there that you will find super useful. So go grab that freebie. The second thing that we're offering you is as soon as you grab that freebie, that course, you will have access to our free community. And I think the last time I checked, we had over 6,000 members.
Whoa,
in that community.
6,000!
I know, right?
That's
so
wild.
6,000 members. I think it's something like that. If not more, if you actually correct me if I'm wrong, we might have more people in there. But what's cool about that community is that you can link up with other people who are also in there. We have a channel there that's called Interview Buddies. It's completely free for you. Go in there, post a link to your Calendly or cal.com or your favorite scheduler, and link up with people who are also preparing and schedule buddy interview preparation sessions. It's super, super vital to practice, not just with someone like us, meaning professional coaches, but just with partners who could be your friends, your your partners at home, but very, very usefully with other people who are also prepping for Amazon interviews. So go get that. And we have another channel in that free community where our AI bot, who we lovingly called Andy for no reason whatsoever, is answering all of your questions about Amazon interviews based on the content of our channel. So we've trained that bot on all of the content of our YouTube channel, and it's an incredibly valuable tool. Costs us a fortune to run, but we're giving it to you for free. Enjoy it, use it. And then the last thing is you are going to get our Amazon Interview Prep Tool Pack, which is a PDF. Doesn't sound too sexy until you know what's inside that PDF. We have over 90 questions, plausible Amazon interview questions, grouped by leadership principle. The reason why we call them plausible Amazon interview questions is because obviously you guys will know that there is the official list of Amazon interview questions, which is only for internal use at Amazon. We don't have that list because it's confidential. And even if we had access to that list, we wouldn't give it to you because it's confidential. But instead of that, we used our experience working at Amazon and interviewing and coaching a ton of candidates to come up with questions that could be very plausible as the ones that will show up in an interview. By the way, Amazonians can invent those questions on the fly as well. So I used to do that. I was quite naughty at that. So grab that freebie. And with all those freebies, you guys will be way well on your way to prepare for Amazon interviews. And so we wish you the best of luck.
Yep, good luck. Anyone's got an interview coming up, wish you well. And hopefully everybody else, we might see you next week.
See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye. I'll see you, Evgeny. Bye.